Kraftwerk's music has touched generations of musicians and avid listeners for over 50 years. The band was recently inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and their music I felt deserved a thorough overview.
Music.
Welcome Kraftwerk to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Music.
I'd like to discuss one of Kraftwerk's unrecognized gems, and one of my favorite albums. As a quick synopsis for those who are not familiar with the band, Kraftwerk is a German band formed in Düsseldorf in 1969 by Ralf Hutter and Florian Schneider. Widely considered innovators and pioneers of electronic music, Kraftwerk was among the first successful acts to popularize the genre. Kraftwerk developed a self-described experimental robot pop style that combined electronic music with pop melodies, sparse arrangements, and repetitive rhythms while adopting a stylized image including matching suits. The band's work has influenced a diverse range of artists and many genres of modern music, including synthpop, hip-hop, post-punk, techno, ambient, and club music. Many of their popular hits include Autobahn, The Robots, The Model, Computer Love, Pocket Calculator, Numbers, and much more. Also to add, I may refer to Kraftwerk as Kraftwerk, the American English pronunciation of the name, just out of habit, so for all of the purists, please excuse the pronunciation. In 1982, Kraftwerk had just wrapped up their live tour for their popular album, Computer World, and started work on their next big project. The working title for this album was originally called Technicolor, but the name was abandoned due to it being trademarked. Instead, they went with the name Techno Pop for the album concept. During their work on the album, they released one song from their recording sessions, Tour de France, which was released in 1983 as a single. The track achieved moderate commercial success. However, Ralf Hutter suffered a cycling accident on the Rhine Dam and was unable to work with the band for quite some time. When work on the album finally recommenced, the band was concerned that the album's production was not as groundbreaking as their previous albums. Following with their reputation as sonic innovators, the album was completely redone from scratch at least once. Ralph traveled with the master tapes to New York where he worked on the mix with, I'm sorry to all my French viewers, Francois Kevorkian. The album was not released until 1986 under the new name Electric Café. Tour de France was not included on the album and was left as a standalone single. So now I'm sure that many listeners are saying either, I've never heard of this album, or that's not my favorite album by them. That's understandable, but that's exactly why I chose this album to discuss today. The album was not received as positively as its predecessor, Computer World. Audiences considered the album sterile and cold compared to their prior work. Critics had pointed out that the album lacked a strong, cohesive theme to bring the album together. Albums like Autobahn, Trans-Europe Express, and The Man Machine were such albums that had strong, cohesive themes. Many did not enjoy the album and were disappointed after half a decade of time had passed since the band's prior album. So after years of time working on the album, the group had lost their momentum as the drummer, Wolfgang Fleur, left the band in 1987. I would like to revisit this and listen to this piece of music history as I give my opinions and perspective on the album.
Boing, boom, Tschak. Boing, boom, Tschak. Boing, boom, Tschak. Boing.
The album opens with peculiar voices speaking in percussive phrases.
Boing, ping, boom, Tschak, ping.
The introduction to this album is an experimental variety of pitched drums and digital voices. This composition acts as a startup to the album, expressing its eclectic charm as an avant-garde idea. clearly presenting itself as a different electronic album compared to the band's previous bodies of work.
Boing, ping, boom, chak, chak, ping, ping. Boing, ping, boom, chak, ping, ping. Boing, ping, boom, chak, chak, ping. Boing, ping, boom, chak, chak, ping.
Plucky synth leads break up the electronic beat as the song fades into the next piece.
Boom, chak, boom, chak, boing. Boom, chong.
The ethereal noise expanding to each edge of the listener's spectrum fill the space of emptiness. As a computerized voice speaks to the listener, Musique Non-Stop, Techno Pop. The song breaks as a melody of strings is introduced. A metal and crunchy beat kicks in as Ralph starts to sing simple phrases accompanying the theme.
Synthetic electronic sounds, industrial rhythms all around.
Other instruments join in after the vocals are introduced, breaking for the chorus. The song demonstrates its vast digital encyclopedia of different soundscapes and samples with how creativity can be shown in a brand new way.
Non-Stop, Techno Pop.
Many mainstream musicians at the time used different samplers to add background ambiance or acoustic instruments to their songs. However, Kraftwerk chose to break the mold, distorting samples to make a different aesthetic and sound.
Electronic sound, industrial rhythms all around.
The song continues using the strong melodic theme with percussive breaks, even using the same melody within the metal percussive strikes that accompany the drums later in the song.
Techno Pop.
Filling the spaces with digital synthesized voices from the deck talk, Florian had stretched deep vocals to complement the main chorus. The song includes other languages as well, such as Deutsch and Espanol. Kraftwerk creates tension within the song with its absence of vocals or drums within certain parts.
Music.
The track was definitely meant to be implemented as a dance track, and less of a traditional pop track embracing roots of trance and ambient themes. I feel like the minimalist aesthetic that the band is known for across the globe was first introduced with this album.
Techno Pop.
As the track fades to silence, high-pitched voices pan from left to right, almost as if a choir of computers fills the edge of the sound spectrum.
Music Non-Stop.
The iconic Roland 808 drum machine kicks in with the classic Kraftwerk clicky blips. Kraftwerk's distortion and clipping of the digital voices is used in a creative way to give an entertaining and catchy feeling to the song. Truly delving deeper into the categories of almost uncomfortable or disturbing, the voices can give the listener odd feelings.
Non-stop. Non-stop.
I myself find the song specifically interesting for the fact it sounds almost alien or otherworldly to me. Not exactly like Star Wars or Blade Runner, but more so just ethereal. It could be considered repetitive, but considering other genres of music descended from this, I would say this is intended to be more so. The album is portrayed in a way that current clubs may present certain dance tracks, long with a main theme or core to its heart. The music, however, isn't meant to be fun, happy, or even human for that matter. The way I truly process this side of the album is unearthly. The tones are cold and sterile, true. The vocals are odd and awkward, sure. But the actual songs are meant to be more grandiose than the rest of their discography. So far, I love the album and the unconventional style it poses.
The number you have reached has been disconnected.
Harmonic phone beeps interrupt the silence as a drum beat accompanies the noise. Various phone sounds are played, including dialing and ringing, creating tension from the buildup of drums and the sound effects. The reverb on the instruments gives everything a hollow yet empty feeling.
The number you have reached has been disconnected.
A harmonic synth lead plays with the marcato string strikes, as Karl Bartos sings on a Kraftwerk song for the first time.
I give you my affection and I give you my time. Try to get a connection on the telephone line.
Presenting emotive and yearning vocals calling to the listener. The different synth sounds, plus the sampled strings and sound effects, change the classic Kraftwerk theme of analog synths.
I call you up all night and day.
Before cutting into resonant synth blips, followed by different phone dial-up sound effects. This is one of my favorite Kraftwerk tracks, as it follows a more romantic theme and less of a technological presence. Similar to The Model from The Man Machine, the track is a more emotive song to break up the sterile and cold songs within the mix. I personally prefer the 4-minute cut of the song that was released later on pairing with the song House Phone.
The number you have reached has been disconnected.
Disturbing and uncomfortable whispering voices introduce the next tune. The sampled strings return this time in the form of a desperate and cruel sounding composition. The song feels both sad and evasive as the strings follow the drum beat.
I don't want to be your sex object. Show some feeling and respect.
Ralph sings in a cold and detached tone as if he is evading the discussion he is currently having with the listener. The lyrics repeating, "I don't want to be your sex object." It seems direct, but I personally would prefer to see this song as having multiple meanings.
No. Why? No. Why? Maybe. Perhaps.
Having breaks within the song, with only digital voices communicating between each other. The second break within the song
¿Quieres? No. Si quieres, ¿por qué?
has Spanish vocals before it cuts into a sampled bass solo.
A lo mejor.
The slap bass sounds both fitting for the theme and breaks up the simplicity of the strings and the synthesized vocals. The bass adds both a sexual and aggressive undertone to follow the possible conflict of the disagreement between the singer and the listener. The song closes with more conflicted synthesized vocals, as the strings close the song in a dire and sinister manner. Easily one of the darker and more unappreciated Kraftwerk songs. Bubbling rivets of pitched sounds glide left and right before a deck talk choir chants the chorus to introduce the closing song. Without a doubt, possibly the most outlandish song of the album, kicks in with a digitalized voice for the lead melody. The airy feeling of the vocals lift the listener up as eccentric tones follow the drums. A deep melancholic choir breaks with the chorus before the deck talk returns, calling out the chorus.
Musique rythmique, son électronique, l'art politique, à l'âge atomique.
Ralph this time through sings in French, giving a sophisticated energy within the song. The lyrics more so describe the band and the image they present as an artistic medium, as they have considered themselves a multimedia group in the past. I really like this song, as it sounds like a futuristic dystopian band that would be inside an alien cabaret. It embraces the odd theme of the band, almost alienating themselves as if the album and its songs are not of this world. I think its roots within sci-fi give it a strange presence and makes it much more engaging and interesting. As the song evaporates with its ending, the album closes on a darker yet resolved note. And that concludes the album. Kraftwerk's LPs were typically about 6 songs or so, 3 songs on each side, since a lot of their tracks were longer and could go on for much more of the album. Now I'd like to go over some extra fun facts about the album and more details about it, along with my overall review and opinion. In 1983, Kraftwerk's demos of the tracks were leaked. Only 2 tracks were leaked as demos, Sex Object and Techno Pop. Many fans of the band claim they like these versions better and find them more warm and fitting within the Kraftwerk discography that was established up until 1981. These are truly interesting versions of the 2 songs, featuring the band's usage of the orchestron, giving it a classic, darker, lo-fi sound that Kraftwerk was known for. As Sex Object is more of a synth-pop tone rather than its orchestral piece. There's also no digital voices from the deck talk like the released studio version. Sex Object also contains the Tour de France slap bass as well. I can understand others preferring these versions, but I personally prefer the versions that were finalized in 1986. Listening to the studio mix of the 1986 versions sound much more polished and more expansive in the spatial spectrum. I can understand others preferring these versions. The tracks use more experimental and expansive depth of the sound space and feel much bigger than the demos. I do personally like the Techno Pop melody though, and would have liked if they used the melody in one of the final versions of their songs. The 1983 Techno Pop demo sounds much more similar to Trans-Europe Express's style of the expansive European experience. I want to quickly go over the instruments they used on this album because it supports my thoughts at the end of the video. Kraftwerk always obtained new instruments for their studio that they felt were interesting, different, or usable. They always tried to be new and up to date, just like many people are currently with technology. Some of the instruments people suspect, but aren't certain of: the Dektalk speech synthesizer, the NED Synclavier 2, a digital synthesizer, the EMU Emulator 2, the Roland TR-808 analog drum machine, the Sequential Circuits drum tracks, a sample drum machine, the Yamaha TX-816, a digital synthesizer, and the Lin 9000 drum machine. All of these instruments are based on conjecture, and if anyone has any information on their tech or instruments used, please comment below. The site I found this information on is within the description of this video in case you are interested. Kraftwerk constantly updated their tech they brought into their studio, Klingklang Studios, to create their iconic soundscaping and rich tones. They often sought out new and high-quality gear. In 1981, they even brought most of their studio with them during their Computer World tour, minus certain instruments such as the Veka Orchestron. The instrument wasn't within the best condition due to its build, and wasn't reliable for live shows. Kraftwerk obtained the new gear specifically for the album in order to generate ideas and develop different themes based on the instruments they had. The band's prior albums all maintain consistent themes, using usually the same line of gear, only obtaining small bits and pieces here and there. But Electric Café was such a different album due to the new inclusion of the instruments that were being used for the time. The world during the 1980s had one of the biggest technological shifts in terms of music. MIDI, a new technology that allowed musical instruments to communicate with each other, and computers, essentially meaning that the instrumentation and performance became easier for musicians within the studio. Also, digital was becoming the new medium and was easier to use than tape. New, smaller instruments were being introduced, along with newer synthesizers that could recreate more realistic sounds, and digital sampling, technology using recorded sounds to play as instruments. With that said, much in the music industry had changed from 1981 to 1986, not just technologically, but musically as well. Kraftwerk had to work within the new standards of music, where synthesizers were much more common and analog synths were becoming antiquated. The group not only had to make a new album that fit Kraftwerk's theme as sonic innovators, but they had to basically rediscover their eccentric and unique sound. The album art itself is one of my favorite album art pieces of all time. The standalone digital busts of the quintessential members stands out to me. The technology used at the time was developed by Rebecca Allen. She actually used state-of-the-art facial animation software developed by the New York Institute of Technology. The technology for the time was groundbreaking and influential. The art was created scanning and photographing Kraftwerk's original mannequins from the 1970s that they had used for promotional art. Without a doubt, the art and the music video for Musique Non-Stop deserve credit as pioneering forces for the future of technology within art. Wolfgang Fleur expressed his thoughts in an interview in 2001 on Kraftwerk's time during Electric Café.
They had done a big mistake from my side, and Carl told me the same. They bought a Synclavier. Oh God, you know what that is? To work with it, you need years to go through such a big, like a telephone book, the advice book how to work with the tool, with the instrument. It's one of the most complicated synthesizers of the world, and Ralph and Florian are also not the fastest ones to go through a technical Bedienungsanleitung, you know. And Carl said they had sitten for hours, for months, for years to get everything fixed, and then they rebuilt the studio. They made it very new, like looking like the NASA today, climate control inside, air conditioning, and new synthesizers. And they had more to do with getting themselves in shape to work the instruments than bring new music out. And then came digital out, then came MIDI out, and then the industry exploded with new systems. And suddenly they ran after it. They were not the foreriders, as we say in Germany, you know. And this took all the years. Carl told me, I just was not with them. I just can only recall him. And he said, it's good that you were not with us. It was so boring to store everything what was all the years recorded in analog style, to replace them and everything into digitalized things, you know.
Karl Bartos also shares his thoughts in this interview from 2008 on his time during Electric Café.
We were supposed to call it Techno Pop, and that was the name of the record. But somehow we got confused over the production. I remember spending years on the production of Techno Pop between 81 and 84. Yes, 84. And Tour de France was supposed to be one track of Techno Pop. And we had apparently the track Techno Pop as one track of the record, and Sex Object and the telephone call. And Ralph went to New York, to Electric Power Plant, to the Power Plant studio, and made a completely mix of the record. So a completely finished production. And somehow in his mind, and probably in Florian's mind, they got confused with the result. It sounded great, of course, but they didn't like it somehow. We flew over to New York, recorded and remixed and re-remixed and re-remixed the record there, and Florian went home after 1 month, I went home after 2 months, and Ralph went home after 3 months with a finished record, and that record was then called Electric Café. There's a story because it was the name of a TV show in France at that time, and I forgot the details. You can blame me for that, but it got lost in the dust of the Museum of Music.
Well, to conclude the video, many listeners were confused with the final result of the album in 1986. Original fans of Kraftwerk's stylized synth pop were expecting a different album than the final release of Electric Café. Kraftwerk has been known to change their genre as they did from 1970 to 1973. They were originally more krautrock and experimental, but by 1974, that was their major shift into analog synthesizers as they pioneered their classic warm Minimoog-based tunes. Due to their advancements within the music industry, I would say they changed their genre. It wouldn't be fair if I simply stated they changed genres and people didn't like it. Ralf Hutter and Florian Schneider originally were the decisive planners and leaders of the group. During the album's development, they had artistic freedom and no time constraints. Many criticized the album's lack of cohesion due to the ambiguity of the finished record. But if anything, the album almost seems satirical, and I say that lightly. From my perspective, much of the album's content seems rooted in the vast digitalization of technology. Techno Pop and Musique Non-Stop seem much more ethereal, embracing the underground music theme in terms of using sampling and FM synthesis to articulate new sounds in a unique manner. The telephone call is a romanticized piece highlighting the significance of the telephone for communication. Sex Object seems very astute, as if it could be directed towards the music industry as a whole. For Kraftwerk to keep making music almost as if they are an object or a pawn within the music industry. It could even be directed towards synthesized music as a whole, playing synthesizers and using new technology. I personally feel there could be multiple interpretations behind that specific piece. And Electric Café may be one of my favorite songs on the album. The song maintains a more traditional pop structure for the piece, providing a more rooted science fiction-based theme around the concept of the song. I think many songs off of the album are without a doubt some of the most entertaining songs sonically, and sound immense even today. Because Kraftwerk weren't trying to make another pop album, they were trying to find a new sound for the band as a whole. That difference in direction is what inevitably caused Wolfgang Flür to depart and eventually Karl Bartos 4 years later. I can fully understand how others see the album as repetitious, cold, or less engaging than their previous albums. But at the same time, I think that's why I truly love this album and consider it a masterpiece. The album embraced the newest technological medium. Kraftwerk went digital. Their video, Musique Non-Stop, used new technology for the time that many musicians wouldn't even attempt to use. In my opinion, all of these factors show that Kraftwerk was aligning themselves further as a multimedia group. The disconnection of the members of the band affected the final outcome of the album, but I can see where it is still enjoyable to listen to. It's a masterpiece on the fact that the music is nerdy, it is cheesy, it is weird, but Kraftwerk owns those qualities about their music and creates something expansive, unique, artsy, and cool. In my opinion, Electric Café is flawed, but despite its flaws, it's a different kind of Kraftwerk album that I thoroughly enjoy. It's not just another pop record meant to satisfy the record company. It's an unrecognized masterpiece of digital art in all mediums. And like all art, it can suffer criticism. But that's what is great about the album. Despite the negative criticism when compared to Computer World, or The Man Machine, or Trans-Europe Express, it's solidified as a piece of modern European art. Kraftwerk reshaped their brand, and it's the brand they carry on still to this day. Please consider sharing your thoughts and comments down below, and consider leaving a like or subscribing for more content. And if you enjoyed this video, you may be interested in checking out my review of their album Computer World in the link down below, or on the screen. Thank you for watching.